Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Near Memo with David, Mike, and Greg. And today, very, very, very special guest, three
Very, very,
berries.
very, very special
Very, very
guest.
special. Yes, super special. Super excited to welcome Darren Shaw of Whitespark, who is now the steward of the local search ranking factors study, started originally by David Mamet in 2008. And we want to sort of unpack in a relatively short time. We could spend a lot of time talking about this, but we don't have hours and hours. But unpack what the main findings were, what was really interesting about the study, and some implications of some of the things, and what's changed from previous years, because there's always changes. Citations was a big it was an example of that, where it was important, not important. Are there other things like that going on? So Darren, why don't you give us a kind of overview of the methodology for people that don't know the background, and any sort of caveats that you would attach to the findings, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. Yeah. So the methodology it's a grueling 2-hour survey. It takes about 2 hours to get through it. And it's really grown in annoyance since David was running it. So I keep making it longer and harder to do. And fortunately, the local search expert, except for you, Mike, fortunately, most people are willing to keep doing it. I ask Mike every year, and he's like, actually, this year you straight up ignored me. I don't think you responded to any request that I had to
Well, I
ask
didn't
you
realize
to
they were personal. I thought they were general. I thought everybody was giving you a hard time. You were just sending out a mass emails. Went right to my spam folder.
Yeah, it is sad to me, Mike, not to get your insights into this survey, but I understand. So, and
You're
I
you're going to
understand.
get them right now, though. You're going to get them right
I'm going to get
now.
them right now. Yeah, this is where everyone needs to go to hear Mike Blumenthal's ideas on the local search ranking factors. But yeah, so it's a huge survey. It takes a really long time. And, David used to do it in spreadsheets, and then I took that over, and it was an Excel spreadsheet. And then I built this whole custom tool. And now I've moved to SurveyMonkey, and for the past couple editions. And it's this long survey. And so there's two key components to it. One is the open-ended questions. So I ask a number of open-ended questions, and people type their responses. I love that section of the report. And then the other area of the report is the scoring of the factors, and you score them across 4 different areas. So like, let's take a factor like keywords in your web page title tag, your landing page title tag, the page that you link to from your Google Business Profile. You're going to take that factor and you're going to score from 0 to 5 on how impactful you think that signal is for local pack rankings, local organic rankings, how impactful it is for conversions, like will it drive conversions, and how new for this year is how impactful it is for AI search. And so that would be like being visible in ChatGPT, in Gemini, and any of these sort of large language models. So that is the methodology. You did say the word caveat, and I would say it's really important to know that this is not the inner workings of Google. We don't really have much insight. It's an opinion piece for sure. It is based off of what these people that I invite to do the survey, they've been doing local search for a very long time. They have clients, they are in the trenches doing this work. And so it's really about like, what are you seeing working? If you could get 47 of the best local search experts in the world in a room and then ask them like, hey, tell me what's happening. That's what this report is. And so I find it just like a really valuable report, but it is, for the caveat, is like, it's opinions, and some people's opinions are divergent and some people's opinions might be wrong. I don't know. It's opinions. Yeah.
Okay, so is there, beyond the AI material, which you said was new, is there anything else that's different or new for 2026 versus previous surveys?
I would say that I went a little crazy with the addition of new factors. 37 new factors were added to the survey. So it really expanded the length that it took to do the survey. But I worked really hard with my team. So my marketing team that I meet with all the time, we just really spent a lot of days going through the factor list, removing things, adding things, naming things. So we really revised the factor list this year. And so that's where 47 new factors came from. It's like a lot of stuff that we see happening, especially over the course of 2 years, because I haven't done it since 2023. There's new things that keep coming up, and we added those as factors because we want to say, okay, well, yeah, sure, we think this is a new factor. We've heard about people saying that this is impacting ranking. So we add that to the survey, and then we get to actually see where does it fall in the list. So I would say that's what big and new to the survey this year would be the addition of the factors, and then the addition of the whole new section on AI. But also, I put a little bit more emphasis on the local services ads this year too. So I wanted to really highlight the local services ads section, and I took all of the answers from the local services ads and I tabularized that data so that I could score it and figure out like what appears to be the most important. And so I expanded upon that. I got more answers this year than I got previous edition. And I really think it's a critical thing. I know you guys do a lot of work in like PI law, and it's like, if you're not in the LSAs, it's like, well, you're not getting a lot of leads. So LSAs become more and more important. Google's doing a great job of monetizing there.
Yeah. Congratulations, Google.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's jump into this findings. There's a lot of stuff in here. I mean, I just want to say this is an enormously valuable tool for people. It's free. You don't charge for it. You don't turn it into a lead form. It's sort of a gift to the industry. And I mean, obviously David started it, but it's just super valuable. And so I think everybody appreciates the work that goes into it. What
Did your children recognize you after you were done?
Yeah.
I mean, after you came back home and were done with the
Barely,
tabulation?
because actually, I got back from a trip. I went to the UK for Brighton SEO, and I picked up COVID. So I was actually locked in the guest room, quarantined for 10 days, which is when I got most of the like final work done on this like analysis report. So
Well,
I truly was locked in a cave for 10 days finishing the report.
God wanted you to finish it, so that's what happened, I guess.
I guess so.
If you can filter out just through the density of all of this, what are the kind of main findings, the top level findings, if you had to present them on one slide at an event?
All right. That's a good question. I would say the top level findings, as a general rule, and we see this every time we put it out, a lot of the fundamentals basically are the same. And that's what we see almost every time that we release this survey. But I'm always looking. I'm like trying to find like what's new, what are the things. The biggest thing that is new is we have a whole new search interface with AI mode, AI overviews, Gemini, ChatGPT. These interfaces are changing the way that people discover information, including local businesses. So there are some people that rather than going to a Google search, they will type in to ChatGPT, hey, could you recommend a plumber in Chicago? And so they're going to get a list of results, and ChatGPT will even put them on a map, and they'll show you the results, and then they'll explain why they picked those ones. And it's like, so what drives that? Because I really do think that's the future of search. I think that Google is going to flip a switch, and instead of the traditional search results, we're going to see AI driven as the default. And so that is majorly important. And I think that a
I would
lot of
just
the
add to that,
insight.
Darren. I don't know if you've
Yeah, you
followed.
do.
I did some searches now in legal and particularly in PI, but many they're not. They have, at least for the last week, are now showing AI overview local results instead of pack results. Just
Exactly.
to emphasize your point there.
It's coming. Yeah. This is where things are going. So the big insights from this year that we're seeing that's different, it's just being able to see what the consensus is amongst the local search experts about what you can do to improve your visibility in those LLM driven results. And so that whole section is full of very interesting. I've taken all of the factors. So all the 187 factors have been scored for like, how do you think that impacts AI results? And so you will see that the chart itself, or the list of factors for AI results, is quite different than the list of factors for your traditional local pack map results. So the things that are at the very top of this list do not really match, because to rank in local packs and Google Maps, there's so much Google business profile stuff that is playing into that. And I think that the Google business profile stuff is being considered on Google's versions of the LLMs, but this question is pretty broad and wide open. And so it's like, all LLMs? Are we talking about ChatGPT? We're talking about Claude? Are we talking about Perplexity? Because they may have different things. So it's a little bit tricky to try and condense it into just AI search, because the different interface, it's almost like Google's ranking factors versus Bing's ranking factors. They're potentially different. And the same thing could be said about ChatGPT versus Gemini, because in Gemini or AI mode, Google has a much richer database of Google business profiles. But as of the publication of this, I don't really think Google's doing a good job of pulling in data from their own local database. They seem to be like doing the LLM thing, which is mostly based on the website and the broader web reviews and mentions on industry sites.
I would say I'm in labs. I'm sure all of us are, but like I've been served a heavy dose of WebGuide in the last, I would say, 2 weeks. And I think WebGuide does a way better job of sort of leveraging Google's entire corpus of data about a business and about a topic than their typical Gemini or AI overview results do. I've been a pretty big proponent of WebGuide since it first rolled out, just in terms of the user interface, and also the quality of the results seems much, much higher to me. And I wouldn't be surprised if, well, I'm certainly rooting for the product team that's running that to sort of gain influence with Liz Reed for that to be the go forward model. I think that that's a much more, putting myself in Google's shoes, I just think that positions them much better in terms of result quality versus ChatGPT and all these other players.
And it's less jarring. People keep talking about how AI mode is the future of Google search results. I don't think that that's true. It might be that AI mode kind of takes the place of AI overviews in some sense. But I totally agree with David that the web guide is a much more user-friendly interface, and it allows them, in fact, I think, to do it's similar, somewhat similar to what they've got today, but cleaner and sort of better done. It's a better version. But we'll see what happens. They have to reconcile some of these things. They've got 3 or 4 things running around, and they need to kind of bring them together eventually. Which,
I guess I would say that's what makes the timing of this particular survey, for me, I think, really interesting. Like it's kind of great to have a kind of what I think is probably like the last sort of traditional local search result as the kind of dominant paradigm of search. Like I wouldn't be surprised if early in 2026 we see something radically different from Google once they get through the holiday period and they make sure they're not shooting themselves in the foot with respect to ads over Black Friday. But I think that this is going to be a really interesting snapshot of like, okay, in sort of the final phase of this paradigm, here's what mattered, and we're going to see a very different set of factors. If you do the survey next year or in 2027, I think it's going to look a lot closer to what the AI results say in this year's survey.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I was thinking the same thing as you were describing WebGuide. I was like, it's so great that we captured this right before this. You can feel that paradigm shift happening. And so it'd be so interesting when I do the next edition to compare the two. I love that.
In terms of the variables, I mean, these are the same factors, just ranked differently by the contributors. And review signals is in the same place. It's got different weight, but it's in the same place in the map pack and in AI search. And then, other things are there, but they're shifted in different positions. I think we talked a lot about reviews. Were there any interesting review-specific findings this year that you saw or that you've seen?
Yeah, so for people that follow local search closely, they probably saw a lot of people talk about review recency being a factor that in previous editions of the survey was maybe not quite on people's radar. And so we've seen that factor really increase in importance. Before, most people were kind of thinking along the lines of it's like a numbers game. How many reviews do you have? That seemed to be like the number one thing. Like you've got a good rating, you've got lots of reviews, you got more reviews in the competition. That seemed to be the thing that was most important for reviews. As of this edition, we're seeing an awareness that how recently you're getting reviews seems to be a major factor as well. So like you'll actually see it happen for any of those brands that do the review burst requests where they have a mailing list and then once a quarter they email the whole list and they say, hey, can you leave us a review? And then they get a burst of reviews. You'll see them jump up to the top of the rankings. It'll have a positive impact, and then they will slow down. It kind of tapers off until they get a new influx of reviews. And so the recommendation going forward is you need to be asking for reviews on a regular basis. If you stop getting reviews, you will slow down. Google cares about how fresh your reviews are. And that makes sense. Like if a business totally stops getting reviews, let's say they got 2,000 reviews, but they haven't gotten one in 6 months, it's a little bit of a signal that that business is like, are they shutting down? What's happening in that business? Maybe we're not going to show that one in the results because nobody appears to be going there anymore. So I think that Google's algorithm is looking at this, and review recency becomes one of the review specific factors that we're seeing some shifts in mind in thinking around.
It's almost part of the behavioral signals bucket in terms of, is this business still getting visits? Is it still, selling things? Are people still booking things with it? I think
Totally.
it's absolutely. Go ahead, Greg.
No, totally. You're right. Exactly. I didn't think about it that way. It's an engagement signal.
Right. I mean, it's roughly equivalent to a brand engagement signal. So it's not clear to me that it's the review specifically, or is it just a bigger part of just this engagement picture?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. But driving that engagement, regardless of whether it's the review or the engagement, doesn't really matter, right? But you could interpret it as engagement, not as a review specifically. Maybe if people went and searched your brand that many times in the quarter, you'd have equally good results.
Yeah, even if they didn't write a review, they just did the thing.
Exactly.
They went to your profile, they spent a bunch of time on there, and that might have the same impact as someone doing the same thing, but then typing a review.
Right. Sort of demand recognition of demand as a kind of a proxy for other values that are important. The other thing that I wanted to mention quickly is, isn't the sort of burst of reviews kind of scenario problematic from a review fraud perspective as well? If you're getting, if you go periods of time without any reviews, and then here all of a sudden there's a lot of reviews that show up at once, isn't that a sort of a trigger potentially for some sort of algorithmic fraud review?
I will answer quickly, and then I want to hear Mike's take. But basically, I do not see Google doing much about review fraud. It's like, it is a very arduous and difficult task to try and get review fraud taken down. And Google's not taking action themselves. You have to beg and plead and use the product to make it happen.
You have to get an article in the New York Times, and then they'll
basically,
do it.
yeah. Mike, what do you got to say
So
about that?
to answer your question specifically, Greg, there is a threshold of volume that will trigger the little red box warning that this business is getting, but it is very, very, very high. In other words, we've seen it. I mean, Claudia has a good example of it, Tamina, where she had a client that opened a store and had a big influx of business. And then I don't know if she incentivized people to leave a review, but the volume was so high in a couple days that she got the flag. So the answer is yes, but it's a very, very high number that trigger it.
I think there was a point of sale review request scenario there also, if I remember.
Yes, it was a point of sale, right?
Yeah. And Google, that's a different conversation.
But it speaks to this issue of, does Google ever do this? And the answer is yes, they do it, but they don't want to do it too often. They never do it too often.
We can call their enforcement capricious.
Sure. That's
lazy,
whimsical,
cheap.
Yeah.
So what about any, I mean, you may not have an answer for this. I think you alluded to this during the prep. Were there any sort of outliers or major disagreements among the that you could, that sort of pop out? Like, there's somebody over here, I'm not asking you to name names, somebody over here really has a theory about something and it's very different than the rest. Was there some of that?
I'm going to name names because I think he would find it funny. Andrew Shotland, he put in his scoring, and I was surprised by it, that he scored like Google ads, like presence of like running ads across all the factors is like, 2. Everyone else's score on this is 0. And I'm like, that's interesting. And also I have a lot of respect for Andrew Shotland. The guy knows what he's talking about. He's an OG of local SEO. And so I emailed him, I asked him about it, and he was like, well, I don't think it's a direct factor, but from a behavioral signal standpoint, it's interesting to think about the impact of ads. And I think that that's where he's coming from. It's like, he's not scoring it super highly, but there is a thing there. And I was like, it's divergent. He is divergent from what most people are talking about with ads. It's like, no, ads don't impact ranking. Google's it's been tested, and it's like, yeah, no, nobody thinks ads directly impact ranking. But it is cool to see some of these differences and then dig into them. Like, what's happening there? And it's like, I agree. I think Andrew's right. I think that if you are running ads, then there's potentially a ranking impact because the ads get more visibility, more brand search, more
Right. It's a brand thing.
activity around, even from the LSA, or even from like they just create more brand search and more activity on your website. And sure. All right. So that's cool. That's one of the ones that I noticed. I personally have a divergent opinion from what seems to be most people on one specific factor, which is whether or not you're showing your address on your Google business profile or you're hiding it. And there's a number of cases that make my take on this, I'm just like, what is happening here? Because I have seen 2 cases where we removed the address from the Google business profile and the rankings did not change at all. Perfectly stayed in exact place, no change. So there's that. But let me just quickly explain. The idea is that if you are a business that has an address showing on the profile, and then to get into guidelines compliance, Google says you don't serve customers at your location, you need to hide your address, so they remove the address. It is 100% true that a massive amount of people will see their rankings disappear. So as a result, people think this is a ranking factor. Showing your address on your profile, yes, you're going to rank. Not showing it. In fact, people think this is such a huge ranking factor that it came in this survey as number 7, the 7th most important thing you need to focus on. Because of that case where I've hidden the address and seen no movement in rankings, it makes me think there's more going on here. And then I have other cases, which are also quite interesting. Other cases I have seen where you remove the address and yes, it looks like you stop ranking in Chicago. And now what? You're ranking in a suburb of Chicago? What's happening there? Your rankings moved? Oh, that's because when you originally created your Google business profile, you created it here. You removed your address. Google only has one address still on record for your business, and it's the previous address. So your PIN, your ranking kind of position, moved back to where you originally verified. So that's something we see happen all the time. You hide your address and your ranking shift back to where you originally verified. The other case is I've seen this happen where the guy tells me, no, I'm telling you, Darren, I never moved. My address that was on the profile was exactly the same as the address that I verified at. But when I removed my address, my rankings disappeared. And I found them. They were 200 miles north in the desert. And so it's interesting to think about that. It's like, I think there's a bug. It's like, if you remove your address, Google's like, oh no, where is this business? I don't know where to locate them anymore. And so it throws a pin on the map somewhere, or I don't know how it works, but I think Google's system gets confused. And so I found this guy by doing a massive statewide grid in our new local ranking grids, and I found the spot, and then you could zoom in and be like, yeah, for some reason he's now ranking up there. So when you hide your address, do you lose your rankings? I think no. I think your rankings
they just become irrelevant to your
they go
business.
somewhere else. Oh no, now you're ranking in the desert. You're ranking where nobody lives, in the middle of a farmer's field. So this is one factor where you asked me about divergent opinions. I may be the only one that thinks this, but I'm like, I got to do more research on this because it is quite fascinating.
No, there's logic there, because Google probably does need to locate the business in order to,
they're going to set a pin somewhere.
And so even though their guidelines require you to remove the guidelines are at odds with what the machine is doing in the background in some way. There's some inconsistency there.
Yeah, something's going on. There's more to the story that I don't have the answer to yet. I'm still researching.
So what about any surprises? I mean, we're talking about sort of divergent opinions or outliers.
Yeah.
What about any surprises that popped out at you? You don't have to, go deep into the data, but just things. Yeah, David.
Can I share my biggest surprise, which is that if you look, I love this graphic at the top of the report this year, Darren. I know you've done it previously, but just where you're grouping factors and showing what their sort of percentage importance was over the last X number of surveys, right? So you have 2018, 2019, all the way to today. And the sort of starting to get precipitous decline of link signals, I think is very, very
Yeah.
surprising.
Me too.
Again, I think that this is something, if we're just talking about AI results, I can kind of see that maybe link signals, may not be as important for those. But based on the results that we're seeing in our user research and everything else, I mean, it still seems to be playing. They still seem to be playing quite a strong role, at the very least for organic results. But even with respect to GBP, I think you see far fewer results today that are getting by purely on a spammy business name and 500 reviews than you used to. I think link signals still play a pretty big role in Google's sort of traditional results. I was surprised to see that just kind of continued fall off over the last 5 or 7 years. So
yeah, I think it's a reflection of like the general SEO sentiment about links. I think that you see in the broader world of SEO, a lot of people saying, I ranked a whole website number one with no links. Like you see people talking about that, right? And so the shift to content-based optimization and being really good. And actually I think what it is what people are becoming really aware of is you can have great content with no links, but it's being shared in Slack groups, on emails, it's being shared everywhere. And so it's getting all of the engagement behavioral signals, and that's enough to keep it up. And so people are like, you don't need links. You need what Google really cares about, which is, are the humans of the world engaging with your content? Do they like it? If they do, then we should rank it. And so this is a smart move from Google because it becomes more difficult to manipulate because they're looking for the real world signals and they're getting it from the behavioral signals. And so that's why we see links becoming like used to be like, this is actually how the algorithm really works, but they've really increased their dependence, I believe, on the behavioral signals. And called that out a long time ago, David. You were like, this is the future. This is how Google needs to do it. And yeah, you're right.
I still believe that behavioral signals are a big piece of the pie, and I think still an underappreciated piece of the pie. I'm just surprised that kind of everybody seems to be sort of throwing links in the garbage. I think it's a bit of a premature death. So yeah,
I would agree that don't throw them out. You definitely still need the links. Yeah.
Well, we've learned with Google. They never throw an algorithm out. They reduce its importance. They keep them forever. So there's that. And it used to be, like you said, that people did follow links as a behavioral signal much more frequently than they do today. So, I mean, obviously all of that points to multiple factors, but I would agree with David.
Well,
don't throw them out.
There's an argument on the behavioral signals point. I mean, there's an argument that, like, as we were discussing with reviews just a few minutes ago, that in some way most of these things are proxies for behavior or are point to behavior or engagement, and they're just different channels of behavioral expression in a certain way. I don't want to go too far with that, but I mean to sort of piggyback on David's point.
Well, when you own the browser market, you have those signals at a much higher rate than otherwise, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So why do you think, given all given the antitrust trial exhibits and the API link and all the discussion about clicks and rewarding brands and all of that behavioral signals is kind of flat? It's flat versus last year. What do you think is going on there? You think people are just sort of tentative or uncertain? They don't think that, or they just.
I don't have an answer to your question because I'm surprised. So you're asking me about surprises. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I thought you should see an inverse relationship of the link chart and the behavioral chart, in my opinion. So why is it flat? I don't know the answer to that question. And I think there is some like challenges with completing the survey. You think about, how does a person fill out that section, the weightings? And so I got a Google spreadsheet. They put in the numbers and it tells them if it's calculated to 100. And they have to just be like, how important are Google business profile factors? How important are link factors? How important are these factors? So they got to do these weightings. And this chart, I think it's very important to talk about this chart being one piece of the pie. There are actually 3 other charts that I probably should have put in here. Maybe I'll make them post. But this is just local packs. So to rank in the local pack and maps, that's what we're looking at for the changes over time. I should make that more clear because this chart might look quite different for the changes over time for organic, local organic, and for, well, I don't have the changes over time for for AI search, but it would look different. And so maybe we would see the behavior. Maybe people just think the behavioral stuff is more of a website-y signal for local organic. So you might actually see an increase in behavioral on the local organic side, but they're not really thinking that it's as important for activities on your Google business profile. So it's possible that that's why we see a little bit of difference there.
Let's talk about the AI findings, because that's completely new for this year, and obviously it's a hot topic of conversation. And we've seen this sort of pendulum swing from ChatGPT is taking over to a lot of SEOs now saying you don't really need to pay that much attention, or it's all the same SEO. Just do good SEO and you're taken care of, and it's such slight traffic anyway, you don't need to pay attention to it. Not why did you include it, but what are the sort of interesting findings there? I mean, we did already talk about the different order of the findings, but what else would you say about that?
Yeah, I would say that it's quite insightful. I actually really like this data, and I really like the expert Q&A answers to like, what are you seeing working for AI search? So I think it's just a really interesting thing to be thinking about, especially if you think about Google switching to WebGuide or AI mode or Gemini, like these types of things. So it's like getting ahead of local search. But it's like, to your point, a lot of SEOs are saying that it's the same. I mean, there's no different. You should have been doing all this SEO stuff before. You don't have to worry too much about it. If you're doing good SEO, you're doing good AI SEO. I won't say that other acronym.
Don't use the
I
offensive
won't say it. I'm not
acronym.
saying it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're doing good AI SEO if you're doing good SEO. And so that is true to a point, but the reality is I think a lot of people were not putting enough emphasis on the things that the LLMs seem to really care about. And so if you were doing all those things before, then like gold star, you're doing great. But there's only so much time in the day. And so these are some signals that appear to be very important for AI search that I think people need to start thinking about. And so my list for that is getting listed on expert-curated best of lists, like best hot dog stands in New York City. Like, those kinds of lists are really powerful. And so people will write them. And if you are featured on them, then the LLMs are picking up on that and being like, well, they're listed on all 10 of the best lists in the city, so they must be good. And so it
Did
makes
you make a
sense.
distinction between curated lists and just Yelp algorithmic lists from trusted sites like Yelp or
Yeah.
TripAdvisor?
I don't have that distinction in the factor list. The factor is, let me just find it. The
Presence of
factor,
business on expert curated best of and similar lists. Yeah.
yeah, I know what's cool about that factor, David, is that this is not a who factor. You've had that in the list since like 2010 or something like that. You've
Well,
always had.
it's a kind of a local citation, right? I mean, from the
But it's like the
past.
best local citation you could get.
I mean, AI seems to rely very heavily on those kinds of lists when they exist. The eater and these roundups.
But they also rely on non-curated lists that are algorithmically generated from trusted
Well,
sites.
Yelp.
Yelp is a great
I would
TripAdvisor.
argue that that's number 5, which is authority of third-party sites on which reviews are present.
Yeah. Yeah. Or industry relevant domains, just like having a listing on those. But then you're still not in those. I do think it's an interesting question, Mike. Like separate those two types of either one's actually expert curated, the type that you cannot manipulate, you just have to be good to be listed, or the type that is algorithmically driven by the directories. I do think that it might be worth pulling those out as two separate factors, and they are currently not, but it's interesting.
My takeaway is this to me looks like a set of ranking factors that Google has sort of been striving for a really long time, right? There's a lot of unspammy stuff here,
Right.
just in terms of being mentioned on all of these various websites.
Yeah.
You don't see links anywhere at the top of the page.
Right. Yeah, I don't care about
it's
links.
yeah. And so it's about unstructured citations, prominence on these big domains, presence on lists. Like it's more sort of traditional PR type stuff, which I think Google has probably been, attempting to rank businesses that do that well for a long time. And AI is finally, and we see it in WebGuide, frankly, like sort of allowed them to sort of leapfrog all these old, keyword stuffing and review spamming and all these other techniques. So I think it's a really interesting.
Although I would contend they've been doing it in Node Graph and local for years, these things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, separate from organic.
Yeah, but we still, I mean, I would say that these are less spammable than Google business profiles are today, for example.
Right.
I
But
think
these
there's a
are the
very,
factors that have long been involved in local, is what I'm saying,
of
is
course, yeah.
citations, expert-curated lists. We've known them noted and highlighted and emphasized by Google. So I don't see this as a huge change. But
There's one thing very interesting to me about the AI search visibility factors, and it is a distinct lack of behavioral signals. So if you look through this list, like they are not in there. And that's because I think people are thinking about this from the ChatGPT perspective, right? So ChatGPT, they just don't have access to that data. Another reason why I think Google has a stranglehold on this industry, and it's because it's like, one, yes, they've got the ultimate database of local businesses. So from a local search perspective, Google will continue to be king, in my opinion, because nobody else has the rich data that they have in their Google business profiles. Businesses care about keeping their profile up to date with fresh information, real information. They populate the hell out of it, just builds up Google's data set. And so, especially in an AI driven world, Google has so much data there. But they are also the keepers of the behavioral signals. They have
Well, I
all
mean,
that data.
now you have Atlas. It remains to be seen how widely adopted it is. Both Perplexity and ChatGPT release browsers, I think, exactly
Yeah,
for this
good
reason.
luck to them.
Yeah.
I don't see that really catching up.
It's not
because
exactly a
Google
warm reception
has
for
started.
Atlas in the tech press, from what I could see.
Well,
Yeah.
all the security issues are problematic. But I'll tell you that I'm using it a lot and I like it. I mean, I'm using it in tandem with Chrome. I'm using it as it's like the substitute for the Mac ChatGPT client that sat on the desktop. That's how I'm using it. It's just to quickly access it and not have to go back and forth to tabs. We're kind of going to bump up against our time pretty soon. A couple more things to talk about. So you mentioned just a few minutes ago that, people can't do everything, right? In the context of, if there's a list of 100 things you should be doing, nobody gets to that final set of factors. What are the biggest difference makers here that people should really understand? I mean, you've got it all laid out in terms of the weightings, but if they had to focus on a manageable list of things, what would those be?
I would say, well, it depends on what you're talking about. You're talking about AI, you're talking about local packs.
Let's talk about traditional local search.
Yeah, then it's getting your primary category right is super key. Is reviews. It's just review volume pays multiple dividends because, of course, Google is using the reviews directly as a ranking factor, but it also really drives behavioral signals,
and conversions, obviously.
and
That's
conversion. It's just so powerful. Reviews should be your number one focus. If you do not have a review strategy in place, like, do it today. You've got to fix your review strategy, ongoing strategy, and you need to continue refining it and tweaking it because it is so powerful in local search. And it will 1000% pay the dividends for you later when, web guide becomes the default, because Google has all that data. All those reviews will continue to provide value. So it's like the reviews for sure. I would love to see people put more emphasis on behavioral signals. I think it's true on both the Google business profile side of things and on the local organic website side of things. You want to make sure your title tags are click worthy. You want to make sure the reviews are making your profile click worthy. You want to have videos on your profile so that your profile is engaging. People dwell on it, they spend more time in it. And you want to make sure that your profile and your website are answering the questions that people are interested in. So discovering what those questions are and then making sure that everywhere on the internet you're answering. People don't even think about this. Make sure those questions are being answered in your citations. Like when you write your business description, I can tell you what the vast majority of businesses have done. They wrote a description for their business in 2007 when they started their company, and that description has been used on every citation on the internet since then. It's like, you got to now rethink that, write a really good description in semantic triples. This business is this, and this business does this. You want to make it very clear and understandable for the robots what you're doing. And I think that it's like, citation description optimization is a hot new tactic for 2026 that I think people need to be thinking about. But, there is a shift in how you optimize a web page that we're seeing happening because we're realizing that the LLMs are interpreting things a bit differently. No more long pages, just 10,000 words, being more succinct, being more clear in your writing, being more like very
Structured.
scripted, less flourish, just saying we are this, we do these things, and then writing it in that format for the robots, and then also adding the like, and this is why you want to hire us for the conversions for the humans, right? That's like there's just a shift happening in the way that we write website content and optimize website content. But I'd say those are the huge takeaways, like the huge things that you really have to be focusing on is just kind of like, how do you present yourself on your website, your Google business profile, and the broader web, and reviews. You just got to keep reviews coming. They do not only get your reviews on Google, diversify your review strategy, particularly on those industry specific sites, because we are like, oh, look, the LLMs care about your reviews on other sites. But everyone on this podcast would be saying, yeah, Google's always cared about it. You should have been doing this for a very long time because Google was using it too. You're just finally becoming aware of it. And so, yeah, review diversification would be another thing I would say.
As they say, I resemble that remark.
Totally. Yeah.
So we could talk about a whole bunch more things, but I think this has been a great kind of discussion of it, at least at a high level. And you should definitely check out the report itself, which is available on the Whitespark website. I think linked from the top of your homepage if it's still there. Any sort of final words of wisdom from anybody here about the report or about local SEO or the future of local SEO that you want to throw in?
I want to promote Darren's Ask Me Anything on Reddit coming up next week.
Yeah.
So if you have
Thanks.
questions and you want to sort of get into a conversation with Darren, share the details because I just know it's happening.
Yeah. So I don't know if you'll publish this by the time it's happening, but
I think
on
we're going to
Monday,
publish it today.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, you are fast. What a production team. So yeah, Monday, November 10th, I'm doing an Ask Me Anything about the local search ranking factors on the Whitespark subreddit. So if you just, look for Whitespark on Reddit, you're going to find our subreddit, and pinned at the top will be an Ask Me Anything. So I'll be answering any questions that anyone has about the local search ranking factor. And I'm going to keep it open too. It's like an Ask Me Anything anytime. It's an AMAA. So it's going to be running forever. And so anytime anyone has a question, that's the place to go to ask, because the LLMs love Reddit. And so this will be like a nice addendum to the local search ranking factor.
Well, so I was going to say this is not only a sort of an opportunity to get questions answered on the local search ranking factors, but it's a demonstration of a Reddit strategy, a Reddit optimization strategy.
Yeah, leading by example. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. All right.
Building
Well,
your
thank you.
prominence on a key industry relevant domain for SEO.
It's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. Although Reddit did say the other day, I think in their Q3 earnings call, that they're not seeing traffic from LLMs, which is kind of interesting. I think this is a longer conversation, which we don't need to get into, but I think the analytics are problematic here and drawing definitive conclusions about what's going on.
They're very problematic. LLM data is just impossible. There's not good data. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Darren, for taking the time to talk us through this. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it more in future weeks. And there's a lot here to digest. And thanks for doing the survey again.
Yeah.
And everybody,
thanks
for
you guys. Yeah. Honestly, I love you guys so much. You are the greatest in the industry. And it's an honor to do this survey. It's an honor for me, for David to entrust me with that survey. He developed something really special in this industry, and for me to run with it, it's an honor of my life. So thank you, David. Thanks to all of you guys.
Yeah, thank you again. Thanks for listening.